So in the previous section, we focused on present levels of performance. So that summary should give us a lot of really good information that will help us draft our goals. So, and we want our goals to be SMART. What does that mean? SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, relevant, realistic, and time-bound. So go ahead and just take a minute to review what each of those mean independently. So, in terms of specific, we just want to make sure that our descriptors can help us paint an accurate picture or clearer picture of what the student's behavior looks like, right? So if we just say misbehaves, we're not exactly sure what that looks like because misbehavior can be a multitude of things, for example. In terms of measurable, we want to be able to make sure that we can get a sense of frequency, duration, or intensity. So how often, how long, and to what degree. So, you might not go in depth into each one of those, like in depth into frequency, duration, or intensity, but at least one of those should be a focus based on what the behavior is. Sometimes the intensity of the behavior is more relevant than the duration or the frequency. Attainable or achievable. So making sure that we're writing it in terms of what the scholar will do, not what we want them to stop doing. And then we want to focus on positive and achievable changes. And then just making sure that it's realistic, right? Making sure that that we're not that it makes sense that the student will be able to, within a year, be able to learn the skills and practice strategies to be able to achieve what the goal says. So, if a student is currently able to follow directions in one of 5 opportunities, then we probably don't expect them to be able to do that with 100% accuracy by the end of the year. So just making sure that we are being realistic and we're not and we're setting the student up for success to be able to meet the goal. So make it challenging but not impossible, right? And then in terms of time bound, all of our goals within IEPs are time bound. Right. We want to, it's something that we want to achieve by the end of, or by the following year. So if we're having an IEP meeting for the student where we're discussing goals and it's happening August 2022, then we are going to want the goal that we've drafted to be achieved by August 2023. All right, so these are the components that we want to make sure that we're including in the goal, or like we want it to look something like this, right? So include what we want certain behaviors or what certain behaviors look like for the scholar. So when faced with a challenging situation or task, and then include examples of what that could look like. Not every single example, but based on the present levels of performance, based on what's currently being seen as when the student might be experiencing their challenges that we're going to be focusing the goal on. So in this instance, it would be we're seeing it most during a non-preferred task or when they're working in groups or when they're doing independent math work. So we want to include some examples of when some examples of what a challenging situation or task is for this student. And then we want to incorporate some examples of interventions, right? So not every single intervention that you might be doing to address the student's challenges, but what are some examples of what the learned coping skills in this instance could look like? And then include X out of 5 trials, or X out of 5 opportunities, or X out of 5 situations. So just make sure that you are keeping it as simple for yourself as possible to be able to calculate the student success in measuring the behaviors that we want to see. So the reason I say keep it simple is because sometimes we see with goals that it's like in 3 out of 5 opportunities with 80% accuracy. And it's just really hard to measure when you're essentially stacking like a percentage on top of a percentage. So just try to keep it easy for yourself. It's already difficult as it is to try to measure goals, social emotional goals, these kinds of goals versus like trying to measure an academic goal, right? Which it's more intuitive and easier to glean like an actual numerical to establish what success looks like numerically. So just don't make it more complicated for yourself than it needs to be. And then including how and who will measure. So as measured by teacher, scholar, or counseling provider. All right, so these are some examples of SMART goals. So I'm just going to be quiet for about 3 minutes or so and just take those 3 minutes to review these goals and reflect on whether these meet the criteria that we just discussed in these slides. So are they specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, relevant, realistic, and time-bound? And do they include these components within them? So just take about 3 minutes to reflect on that. So hopefully you found that these do meet those criteria. They're pretty well aligned with the guidance from the past couple of slides. I did want to highlight that we want to stay away from naming a specific curriculum or workbook, because if a student maybe leaves Alliance and goes to another school and they don't have that particular workbook or curriculum, then that'll be problematic. So, do you want to have examples of the type of strategies that you might cover? And it might be, you might pull some activities from a workbook, but not being so specific that you're describing a specific workbook or curriculum that potentially might not be accessible at their next site. We want to make sure that this is a goal that can be, or the interventions that included in the goal is something that can be done by anybody, any counseling provider. And then we also, in the next slide, we're gonna discuss how each goal, so these are each examples of annual goals, and each annual goal also has 2 incremental goals. So when we're looking at the annual goal. So we wanna meet, if we're meeting in August 2022 for this IEP and we're reviewing what the annual goal is going to be, we're going to want to meet in August 2023. And then the annual goal is what we want to meet a year from now. And so the incremental goals are what are going to get us to the student meeting the annual goal. So the first goal is going to be kind of the first step. So if we're thinking about the incremental goal being like the first level that we want the student to meet, so it should be the level of difficulty should be lower than incremental goal 2. So it'll increase in demand, right? So for incremental goal 1, and each incremental goal is 4 months. So 4 months from August 2022 will be December 2022. And then, I'm sorry, yes. And then 4 months from December 2022 is April 2023. And then 4 months from April 2023 is August 2023. So the incremental goals, there's 4 months in between until we get to the annual goal. So for the first goal, Ruthie will be able to identify and describe at least 4 coping skills when prompted in 4 out of 5 opportunities as observed by counselor during counseling session. So this level of difficulty is lower than incremental goal 2, because for incremental goal 1, we're just wanting Ruthie to identify and describe coping skills, right? So we're not asking her to, we're not expecting her to apply them just yet. She might start practicing that, but what we expect her to do in the span of 4 months is within counseling session, be able to identify and describe at least 4 coping skills when prompted. Okay, and so then that's kind of like the lowest level of difficulty, or the lower level of difficulty. Then when we get to 4 months from December, we're going to want to increase the level of difficulty to get her closer to meeting the annual goal. So in April 2023, we're going to want, during the counseling sessions, we're going to want Ruthie to be able to describe generalizing the coping skills. So to describe at least 2 times since the previous counseling session when she successfully applied the learned coping strategies, or should have applied. So so when did you apply, or if maybe you didn't apply them, like reflect on when you could have applied them in home or at school in 4 out of 5 opportunities. So so the first one is just like identifying, describing the actual coping skill, and then the level of difficulty increases with incremental goal 2, because we're wanting her to reflect on when she generalized it out in the real world outside of the counseling session, or when she should have generalized and used the coping skill outside of the counseling session. So she went from just describing and identifying what the coping skill is to reflecting on when she's actually used them outside of counseling session, or when she could have used them outside of counseling session. And then that gets us to the annual goal, which is the highest level of difficulty, right? What we want her to achieve in a year. So when faced with challenging situations or tasks, Ruthie will be able to apply the learned coping skills and usage of positive affirmations to complete the task in 3 out of 5 trials as measured by teacher, scholar, and or counselor report or observations. Okay, so hopefully, you know, when you think about it and when you reflect, it might be a lot to take in right now, but it makes sense how you're increasing the level of difficulty of or the level of challenge, so that we're kind of taking those steps, those incremental steps to get the student to be able to achieve the most challenging iteration of the goal, which is the annual goal. All right, so let's go back and reference our handy dandy note catcher. And so based on the present level of performance that you drafted for Stephanie, now let's develop a SMART goal that connects the present level of performance you developed and you know that it's aligned with the goal that you're about to draft. So so remember, we want it to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So go ahead and take about 6 to 8 minutes, or however long you need. You know, you can pause the recording and just draft your annual goal and then also the incremental goal. So within your note catcher, there are some examples of what the annual goal could look like and what the incremental goals could look like. So if you want to use that as a guide, and you can also go back and look at the slides from that we just covered. So go ahead and take that time.